Speeds.
And keep in mind, let's keep feet still during all of this.
Yep.
Make sure I'm off. Are you off? Yes, you're off. Way to go.
All right, we ready? All right. Social media, take one. Soft sticks.
How did you get involved in the pro-life movement?
Well, my on-ramp to the pro-life movement, I think, was kind of non-traditional. I grew up in a household, mother, father's a pastor. I saw a lot of compassion with them. I saw how they cared about people. I'm the oldest of 6 kids. So for me, it wasn't ever a pro-life, it was pro-people. It was how can we serve people, whether it was in our communities, watching my mom and dad counsel people, watching them do different charitable work, whatever it was about loving people. And so for me, also being a pastor's kid, I knew a lot about, going to church, going to Sunday school, learning what scripture said about the image of God and learning about the importance of people and how God created, man and woman and children. And so for me, it was kind of an obvious next step. Specifically when it comes to pro-life, though, I do remember a time realizing the impact of abortion on the Black community and realizing how the abortion rates in the Black community were disproportionate to their white counterparts and thinking this evil is killing us at a higher rate than it is our white counterparts. Why is that? That really got me more interested in understanding the roots of abortion, but also understanding how systemic injustice, how racism today that's going on right now in institutions funnels many Americans, specifically Black Americans, into a decision between choosing life of a preborn child or choosing how am I going to pay for that child. All of the different layers of disparities that we see feed into the issue of abortion. And so specifically as a Black man, I became more interested in how can I stand for life? How can I bring awareness to not just the issue of abortion and the racism that's entrenched there, but the racism that feeds Black people like me into making this type of decision. How can I deal with both? And then another thing, I have 7 children. That's not why I'm pro-life. I was about to make a joke. We can cut that. I was going to say I'm pro-sex, but I have 7 children. I remember with our first child, Grace, she's 13 years old now. And I remember going to the ultrasound, and it was a 3D, 4D ultrasound. And we're sitting there, I'm in a chair, my wife is right next to me. I'm looking at the screen and seeing Grace in utero. And Grace yawned in utero, and I saw it on the screen, and then I yawned. Like, I caught the yawn from the baby that was in my wife's belly, in her womb, right next to me. And I remember leaving that place, and my wife, Kirsten, said that she would love to, at some point, provide the opportunity for ultrasounds to other women, other pregnant women. We didn't know how we were going to do that, when we were going to do that. We kind of set that on the shelf, but it's crazy how when God gives you a vision, and he gave her this idea, how years later we were able to partner with some different organizations and purchase ultrasounds at pregnancy resource centers at different places where we've lived. Being in the NFL, we've lived in 4 different cities. We moved around a lot. And so we've been able to place some ultrasounds in places that meant a lot to us. And so that was kind of another, I guess, door that opened and allowed me to, I guess, have more of a voice and really understand this issue in a broader way when you're able to go to a center and actually speak with women who have had to face this very, very difficult decision.
Thank you. Wow. Okay, what do you think is missing in the dialogue of the pro-life movement?
What's missing in the dialogue of the pro-life movement? There are misconceptions, I think, on both sides of this issue. Whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, I think that there are some common misconceptions, one of which, when having to do with the pro-life community by pro-choicers, is that pro-lifers only care about, being pro-birth. Once the baby's born, there's no desire to promote healthcare or promote any of the things that will help the child. That may be true for some people, for sure, but the pro-life movement has a history, or people that are involved with the pro-life movement have a history of caring for these issues. Now, it's not everybody. It's not enough. But there are plenty of people who, whether through philanthropy, through their churches, through their activism in different ways, actually do serve and care for women and children far beyond birth. So there's a misconception there. I think for pro-lifers, now that we're in a post-Roe America, there was so much, and rightly so, that was directed specifically at having Roe repealed. Roe was egregiously decided. We understand that. But Roe can't be the final marker. Roe can't be the end game. I think for many pro-lifers, there's a feeling that Roe has been overturned. We're good now. The factors that lead women to have abortions, many of them are still intact. And so I think what's missing in the dialogue on the pro-life side is understanding that it's going to take the law. That's vitally important. It's also going to take compassion, but it's going to take real services. 75% of women who have had abortions have said that they would prefer to carry if their circumstances were different. And so for pro-lifers, the conversation has to revolve around how do we as individuals, as collectives, as institutions, how do we seek to create a culture of life that wants to provide for these women who have different issues that is leading them to a decision to abort.
Along those lines, what advice would you give to people on either side as a way, like, how would you, I don't know how I want to place it. How, you spoke of the other day.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
All right.
maybe talk about the approach of your documentary.
Yeah. When I have an opportunity to talk about this issue in settings where you don't know where people stand, in any given room or setting, you have people who are on the far pro-life side or the far pro-choice side. Usually those are the loudest voices in the room. Those are the loudest advocates on social media. Most of America is somewhere in between. They think abortion should be legal in some cases, not all cases, and there's kind of a variety. Even within the church, there are people that are really, really struggling with this issue. One of the things that I love to talk about and that I think we all need, and I have to remind myself about, is this idea of empathy. Having compassion for people, seeing the humanity in people who think different than you. We always talk about, that the preborn child is a human being, that the mother is a human being, that the father is a human being. All that is true, but also all the people who have different opinions that may be different than yours, drastically different, they may break your heart, but they are still people. I had an opportunity to do a documentary called Divided Hearts of America a couple of years ago. And in the documentary, my whole point was, I have my point of view for sure. But I want to give voice to others who have a point of view just like mine, but also those who don't agree with me, because we need to see that even the most adamant person who is pro-abortion, not even pro-choice, they're pro-abortion, that person is still made in the image of God, if we believe that someone else is. And so because of that, it matters how we talk about people. It matters if we call people baby killers. It matters if we disparage them. We are to have a certain common respect for human dignity, whether that person is, on our side or not. And so the thing that I usually tell people, and the thing that I try to do myself, is try to enter the conversation with a form of empathy, especially for a mother or for a child, but also for an opponent, but also enter it with a sense of humility to hear them out, to engage in conversation. A soft answer turns away wrath a lot of times. I think we could use that a lot more in this conversation.
Okay. Lastly, why are you passionate about the topic of life?
Okay. I'm passionate about the topic of life because God gives life. When we read through scripture from Genesis to Revelation, we see a God who created life in the garden. We see man who fell. we see a redemptive process of a God who loves his creation and sent his son to die for that creation. So if God was willing to come in the flesh to die for his creation, how could I not appreciate the life that he created? There's obviously great value there. I care about life also because I care about justice. This issue of life to me is one of many, but is a justice issue. What do I mean by that? We use that term a lot. Justice is our attempt many times to return the order that God created and that has been affected by the fall back as much as we can on earth to its proper relationship, not only with God, but with each other. Justice corrects what the Bible calls impartiality. It corrects what the Bible calls oppression or hatred or prejudice. That's what justice does. And so for me, the issue of life is about giving justice not only to the preborn child who, according to Proverbs 31, deserves to be protected, speak for those who cannot speak for themselves, according to various verses in Scripture, is made in God's image, but also bring justice to a mother who may be dealing with a broken relationship with the father, or may be dealing with different issues when it comes to different injustices that have happened to her. Also, you talk about justice for a father. What are the issues that are making him not want to parent his child? They may have to do with justice. Justice is about protecting vulnerable people. So for me, when I think about the issue of life, I see the word justice. And Micah 6:8, he has told you, O man, what is good and what does the Lord require of you but to do justice, to love kindness, to walk humbly with your God. Jeremiah 9:23 and 24 talks about God being a God of justice, of righteousness, of kindness. I want to be someone who exhibits as much as I can the justice of God, because in actuality, when we talk about being redeemed from our sin, that was an act of justice by Christ on the cross. His blood paid a price for our sin. God's justice had to be dealt with, and Christ did that for us. So when it comes to the issue of life, I can give life to others by being someone who stands for justice, especially on this issue.
That's it. That's all I got. That was incredible. Thank you. Nailed every single one.
Great question.
Amazing.